Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here today. It is a great pleasure for me to get to be here tonight. And one of the gifts for me of these last few months was getting, tiring though it was in a sense, to travel around the country. And one of the things that was great was just being reminded what an incredibly beautiful place this is. You know, we got to Denver and it was gorgeous, but the air was full of smoke from fires still burning in December after the biggest fire season ever. And we got through those gorgeous farmland, much of it still, 60% of it still in a federally declared drought. But it's also worth just saying that it's a terrible thing to take a world this beautiful and for the sake of outsized profits for a few people for a little while, lay it to waste. Tonight's the start of the last campaign I may really get to fight, not because I'm getting tired, but because the planet's getting tired. In the world that we've built, where our institutions aren't working the way they should, we have to do more than we should. That news doesn't depress me. In a sense, it excites me because I think we know what we need to do. I think we've peeled away the layers of the onion. We've gotten to the very heart of things. As of tonight, we're taking on the fossil fuel industry directly. The moment has come that we have to make real stands. We're reaching limits. The biggest limit that we're running into may be that we're running out of atmosphere into which to put the waste products of our society, particularly the carbon dioxide that's the ubiquitous byproduct of burning fossil fuel. You burn coal or oil or gas, you get CO2, and the atmosphere is now filling up with it. We know what the solutions for dealing with this trouble are. Many of the technologies we need to get off fossil fuel and onto something else. The thing that's preventing us from doing it is the enormous political power wielded by those who have made and are making vast windfall profits off of fossil fuel. We've burned enough coal and gas and oil to raise the temperature of the Earth 1 degree. What has that done? There was a day last September when the headline in the paper was, half the polar ice cap is missing. Literally. I mean, if Neil Armstrong were up on the moon today, he would look down and see half as much area of ice in the Arctic. We've taken one of the largest physical features on Earth and we have broken it. Shall we work through the numbers? They're 3 and they're easy. The first one's 2 degrees. That's how much the world has said it would be safe to let the planet warm. In political terms, it's the only thing that anybody's agreed to. Some of you may remember that climate summit in Copenhagen. There was only one number in the final 2-page voluntary accord that people signed. Only one number in it, 2 degrees. Every signatory pledged to make sure the temperature wouldn't rise above that. The EU, Japan, Russia, China, countries that make their money selling oil like the United Arab Emirates, the most conservative, recalcitrant, reluctant countries on Earth, even the United States. If the world officially believes anything about climate change, it's that 2 degrees is too much. Second number, scientists have calculated how much carbon we could pour into the atmosphere and have a reasonable chance of staying below 2 degrees. They say about 565 more gigatons. A gigaton is 1 billion tons. That's not a perfect chance. That's worse odds than Russian roulette, you know. It sounds like it should be a lot. It is a lot. 565 billion tons of CO2. The problem is we pour 30 billion tons a year in now, and it goes up 3% a year. Do the math, and it's about 15 years before we go past that threshold. So that's sobering news. But the scary number is the third number. The third number was the important one and the new one, and it came from a team of financial analysts in the United Kingdom. And what they did was sit down with all the annual reports and SEC filings and things and figure out how much carbon the world's fossil fuel industry, how much they had already in their reserves. And that number turned out to be 2,795 gigatons worth of carbon. 5 times as much as the most conservative governments on Earth think would be safe to pour into the atmosphere. It's not even close. I mean, it's 5 times more. And once you know that number, then you understand the essence of this problem.
What the fossil fuel industry is doing is locking us into a future that we can't survive, that humanity cannot survive. And we know this because just at the end of 2012, we heard this from 3 different conservative sources simultaneously. The World Bank, the International Energy Agency, PricewaterhouseCoopers, hardly a hippie outfit, all told us that if we do nothing but more of the same, if we dig up those reserves, we are headed towards 4 to 6 degrees warming Celsius.
The only problem that these companies have now is that the scientists are watching in real time as they pull off this heist, and it's getting harder to deny. In fact, they're beginning to kind of admit what's going on. Last summer, for the very first time, the CEO of Exxon, Mr. Tillerson, gave a speech in which he said, yes, it's true, global warming exists.
Clearly there's going to be an impact, so I'm not disputing that increasing CO2 emissions in the atmosphere is going to have an impact. It'll have a warming impact.
But since the only way to stop that would be to take a hit to the company's profitability, he immediately tried to change the subject.
It's an engineering problem, and it has engineering solutions.
Really? What kind of engineering solutions were you thinking?
Changes to weather patterns that move crop production areas around, we'll adapt to that.
Look, all respect, but that's crazy talk. We can't move crop production areas around, okay? Crop production areas are what people in Vermont refer to as farms, okay? We already have farms every place that there is decent soil on Earth. It is true that Exxon has done all it can to melt the tundra, but that does not mean that you can just move Iowa up there and start over again. There is no soil. If fossil fuel companies want to change, here's how we know they were serious. 1, they'd need to stop lobbying in Washington. 2, they'd need to stop exploring for new hydrocarbons. The first rule of holes is that when you are in one, stop digging, okay? And the third thing they'd need to do is go to work with the rest of us to figure out the plan where they turn themselves into energy companies, not fossil fuel companies, and figure out with the rest of us how to keep 80% of those reserves underground.
Why would we build a 1,000-mile pipeline taking almost 1 million barrels of oil from the most carbon-intensive fuel source on the planet when wind energy is a whole lot cheaper and a whole lot cleaner? Why would we drill in the Arctic when we know that solar power can meet our energy needs across the country? Why would we frack our countrysides and our watersheds when we know that energy efficiency would save more energy than natural gas can provide? I think that we're coming to that point now where extreme energy sources are so bad that the questions and these challenges are going to become easier and easier.
Renewable energy is subject to manufacturing economics, where all products go down in cost the more you make, versus the competition, fossil fuels, are resource-oriented, not manufacturing, and the cost of resources goes up the more you use. And so you fundamentally have 2 curves that we're going to cross, and they've crossed in the last 5 years, in particular the last 3 years. And so I've had a smile on my face for 20 years, and I knew this was going to be a big winner. If you really got into the numbers, and this, I said, this is unstoppable. I saw this coming, and it's just fantastic to be here now and to see it happening. And then wind turbine costs have really come down as they build bigger towers, longer blades, more efficient gearboxes. The whole thing has just improved. And so the cost of solar electricity, the electricity from solar energy, has dropped 80% in the last 5 years. The cost of wind electricity has dropped 50% in the last 5 years. So in both cases, the electricity from wind and solar has come into economic competitiveness finally.
During the next few years, China will speed up the transition to sustainable energy even further. But what's going on here? Why does China believe it can introduce wind and solar energy so much sooner than we in the West?
实际上的话呢，在这个因为这个一个新技术，它从开始的研发到大规模的推广使用，它中间也很有一个过程。这个过程里边的成本是呈现一个开始比较高，慢慢下降这么趋势。但是实际上就随着你这个应用规模越大，它的成本就越低。你比如说这个中国你看这里边有个曲线。这中国的learning curve啊，这个中国的learning curve，这个是什么意思呢？这上面就介绍的就是风电的发电的成本，发电的发电成本就是每1000瓦多少欧分啊？这是个英文的这欧分，欧洲的欧分。这个的话呢，就是那个中国的装机容量啊，这中国的装机容量。这个是比如说这是到这个这到这2亿，这是2亿千瓦，对吧？这2亿千瓦。前边的话呢，比如到这儿的话呢，这是1亿千瓦啊。再往前面点的时候，实际上你看明显的下降了。实际上就是说呢，什么意思呢？在中国的装机在这个在5000万千瓦的时候啊，它就下降了很快了啊，就可以发现很快了。将来，但是呢，在未来的话呢，这会儿下降的非常快。但是你到这个，比如说达到中国的这个装机容量达到2亿的时候，它下降的就开始就比较这趋势比较缓慢了。这个过程，特别是从那个开始没有到1亿之间。这个下降是非常快的啊！这个的话呢，实际上不光是我发现了，这整个这个中国这个好多的研究人员啊，还有这个企业，特别是企业界啊、政府啊，都发现了。他发现这个有意思。
这一步能够实现的如此之快，能够到来的如此之快，能够使这些产品呢，很快的、真正的应用到了我们普通老百姓的生活之中。就在目前你居住的北京。就有很多的个人用户已经安装上了这种太阳能光伏发电系统。
这政府都希望这个learning curve can happen as early as possible， 他希望它早点出现，而且这learning curve的话，这就很早的就下来，这样的话呢，可以有大规模的那个利用。它实际上这些措施都是希望的话呢，能够在很短的时间内，就是这个成本会降下来。他希望是这样，这是他这个目标。
其实它就是一个数字。
对，
是这么简单的。
你必须得，我们当代人，特别是在开始的时候，特别是在初始阶段，你必须有一些成本，你收着配。但是最后来这个以后的这个 return 它是非常高的但是开始愿不愿意投资呢？这里边有个问题。中国这个体制觉着，中国这个特殊体制觉着这个事应该这么做啊，他就投了。他就投了，他就没有那么多的那个 debate， 没有那么多 debate 的。你像我知道你像在你们荷兰了，要提高这电力附加费啊，交税啊，那你得上到议会里边去，的 Congress debate 去，对不对呀？那很难，在中国不需要。因为中国政府一般的是要制定当前的政策，要看。从长远看，他不是光看这几年，这是非常，这也是跟西方不一样的。因为你西方的政府，这个 term 就是当前这几届，这几年的关系，那中国政府因为他这个老是不换。
Thank you for coming. The world has changed dramatically. I've been investing in renewable power since 2000, and last year was the year when the price of renewables fell below the price of coal, oil and gas. And as a result, the whole world we live in is about to change drastically. That's a shocking news that appeared in last October when there was an open tender for the power for Dubai and was won by DEVA power plant at 5.65 cents per kilowatt hour. Oil would have to fall to $10 a barrel to compete with this price of solar. 15 years ago, it was 100 times more expensive to get power from solar. So all these 15 years, there had to be subsidies for anybody in their right mind to put a solar panel on the roof. Now, in Germany, I ask myself, do I pay 20 cents to the government? Or do I put a panel on my roof for 9 cents a kilowatt hour? plus a battery in the basement for 5 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm free of the government.
ايه البدائل وايه التخوف على دول الخليج في المرحله القادمه؟ هل في تخوف من الاحتباس الحراري؟ هل لازم نتجه للطاقه البديله او الطاقه المتجدده ونبعد عن الغاز والنفط الى حد ما؟ هل لازم يكون في صناعات تحويليه حقيقيه على ارض الواقع؟
So my recommendation to the Middle East is become part of the solution. Invest heavily in companies in Europe that have the solution to provide cheap and resource-efficient production sources.
What funds have you got under management?
So under asset management we have 200 million and advice 5 billion.
What have you averaged for the funds?
30% at the moment. Long-short strategy has averaged 25% per annum over the last decade.
And what are you short? You short the non-renewables, I presume.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we've been able to make a lot of money and do a lot of good in the world. And you have to imagine this like a big dam. As long as the price is above competitive markets, there needs to be subsidies. When that situation is broken and free market decides to go for solar, it will break like a dam is broken.
When I was head of risk management at Goldman Sachs, and I would go to my boss, who was the chief financial officer of the company, and say, we have a risk problem. There was no, well, I'm busy, come back next week, or come back this afternoon. It's always the most important problem. Well, what is it? What do we need to do? How do we address it? In the world today, with respect to climate risk, there's no one there. Governments aren't responding. Right now, there's no one in charge. There's no one to say, all right, we have to address this. It's a terrible problem.
Litterman also feels investors should pull out of fossil fuels, but for other reasons than the divestment activists.
I have a lot of agreement with the people who are asking for divestment. We're all on the same page that this is a huge problem that needs to be addressed. The question is, how do you address it? And the divestment movement is basically looking to stigmatize fossil fuels. And in some ways, they have. They've made it easier to regulate against coal, for instance. But I don't agree that we should sell fossil fuels for ethical reasons or that that's going to change society. It's the reason to sell fossil fuels is because they're overvalued. So it's not a moral argument or an ethical argument, it's an economic argument. And that's why we talk about stranded assets.
On the financial market, investors are getting more and more worried about climate change. Their worries don't concern rising temperatures, but the falling prices of their assets. The stranded assets theory that Bob Litterman talks about is a simple one. To avoid dangerous climate change, the world shouldn't warm up by more than 2 degrees. This target involves limiting CO2 emissions. Fossil fuel producing companies have large reserves in oil, coal and gas. The proven reserves correspond with about 762 gigatons of CO2. But to keep climate change in check, CO2 emissions cannot exceed 225 gigatons. That is about 1/3 of the proven reserves. It means that in the face of climate laws, about 2/3 of fossil fuel reserves cannot be used, so they are worthless. Calculations may diverge, but a conservative estimate would be that the value of oil, coal and gas-producing companies may drop by 40%. To investors in these companies, this constitutes a great risk.
So if their valuations are too high, let's call them stranded assets, I don't want to own them. So when I'm talking to investors, that's what I tell them. You should worry about the risk that certain assets in your portfolio are overvalued. You can increase your expected return by eliminating those assets from your portfolio. What's happening now, it's kind of interesting, is that when you realize that the scarce resource is not the fossil fuels, the scarce resource is the atmosphere's capacity to safely absorb emissions, then we're not going to burn all those fossil fuels. And so so then all of a sudden there's a surplus of fossil fuels that we need. There's more coal than we're ever going to need. There's more oil than we're ever going to need. And indeed, what happens is, let's say if I'm Saudi Arabia and I've got a huge reservoir of oil that I can more or less tap into for a couple of dollars a barrel, I want to produce it today while I can. I don't want to keep it in the ground. If I realize I may never be able to sell all this oil, I'm going to take market share today. The expensive sources of oil, things like tar sands, deep sea drilling, Arctic drilling, those aren't going to happen. We don't need that oil. We'll use the cheap oil.
If your macroeconomic view says we've come to a point in time where renewables are now cheaper than fossil fuels without subsidies, then you get a macroeconomic view of the world which says Brazil will go bankrupt, Russia will go bankrupt, Indonesia will go bankrupt, Saudi Arabia is going bankrupt, and everybody else is going bankrupt depending on oil and gas. And individual oil companies will see their value collapse. The way that the balance sheet of an oil company works is they have huge assets, which are proven reserves, which are valued on the basis of a long-term future oil price. And as long as that long-term future oil price is higher than the lifting cost, that's a positive profit, which is discounted forward and gives you the asset. Now, if that long-term oil price forecast is wrong and it falls below the cost, that asset evaporates. And to us, there's no question that the oil, gas, coal companies of this world are the greatest short of all time, and what a wonderful place to be shorting.
The combination of China's scaling up and financial innovations on Wall Street is resulting in rapidly falling prices for sustainable energy. In the Middle East, solar energy is so cheap that it's being used for the extraction of oil. In Oman, for instance, solar energy is being used to pump up heavy oil, when this used to be done with natural gas. The price of wind and solar energy hasn't bottomed out yet. It is expected that over the next few years, prices will drop substantially. But even if wind and solar energy becomes dirt cheap, we're still not where we want to be.
Never forget, we have to talk about the system, because as you get more and more renewable energy, intermittent energy in the system, so you've got to invest elsewhere in the system, in the grid, perhaps in power storage, in order to continue to operate. It's about ecosystem changes, where you can do some of this, and then that enables that, and then you can do some of the other, and then this changes, and so on. To use Facebook terminology, it's complicated.